It was supposed to be a solemn day of mourning, a moment to say goodbye to the man she had loved for over 2 decades. But instead, for Angela Morris, a soft-spoken woman from Georgia, the funeral turned into a nightmare. As the church filled with friends, family, and distant relatives, whispers turned into stares, and before she could fully grasp what was happening, she was asked to leave by her own in-laws. No one came to her defense. No one stopped it. And just like that, she was shut out of the final farewell to the man she had built her life with. But what came afterward, no one could have expected. Angela stood outside the church doors, stunned. The warm July air pressed against her skin, but she felt nothing. Her hands trembled, not from anger, but from heartbreak. She had stood by Marcus through thick and thin, supported him when he lost his job, nursed him through illness, and stayed faithful even when others would have walked away. And now, on the day meant to honor his life, she had been cast aside as if she didn't belong. It wasn't just the embarrassment, it was the betrayal. Marcus's family had never fully accepted her. To them, she had always been the woman from the wrong side of town. Too quiet, too modest, not their kind of people. Even after 23 years of marriage, they still introduced her awkwardly as Marcus's wife, never by name. Angela thought they'd grown past it. She thought grief might unite them. She was wrong. She sat alone in her car, parked near the cemetery, watching from a distance as the small crowd gathered around the grave. She couldn't hear the pastor's words, but she saw the dirt fall, handful by handful. Her heart broke all over again, not just for Marcus, but for how little the life they built together seemed to matter now that he was gone. But just as she turned the key in the ignition, a voice tapped against the silence. It was Marcus's best friend, Darren. "Angela, wait." She looked up through teary eyes. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You should have been the one standing next to the casket." Marcus would have been furious if he knew what they did. She didn't respond at first, just nodded slowly. Darren opened the passenger door and sat beside her. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and after you hear it, things might never be the same." Angela stared at Darren, unsure whether she wanted to hear what came next. He glanced around, as if making sure no one was watching, then turned to her. "Marcus was hiding something," he said quietly. "Something big, and it had to do with his family." Angela blinked. "What do you mean?" "He told me about it a few weeks before he passed. Said he was finally ready to come clean to make it right. But he died before he could." Angela's breath caught in her throat. Darren reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn envelope, yellowed at the edges. Her name was written on the front, in Marcus's familiar handwriting. "He gave this to me," Darren said. "Told me to give it to you if anything ever happened to him." Angela's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Inside was a letter. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning each line with increasing disbelief. "My love, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry for leaving you like this, especially knowing how they might treat you. But I need you to know the truth. My family, they've kept secrets, ugly ones, and I was part of it for a long time. I stayed silent, and that silence hurt people. You'll find the documents in the safety box under the floorboards in the old cabin. You know, the one where we spent our 3rd anniversary. I never sold it even when I said I did. What's inside will explain everything. I hope you'll forgive me. I hope somehow it will help you understand. I love you always. M. Angela's hands dropped to her lap, the letter resting loosely between her fingers. I don't understand, she whispered. Darren looked at her solemnly. There's something in that cabin that Marcus didn't want falling into the wrong hands. And judging by what his family just did to you, I think they know it's still out there. Angela stared through the windshield, the cemetery behind her and a storm of unanswered questions ahead. I need to go, she said, her voice steadying. To the cabin? Darren asked. Angela nodded. If Marcus left something for me, then I'm going to find it, no matter what they're hiding. Angela didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, the letter clutched in her hand, reading it over and over until the words blurred. Every memory of Marcus came rushing back. His laugh, his long silences, the way he always seemed to be carrying something heavier than he let on. Now she realized he had been. By sunrise, Angela had packed a small bag, grabbed her keys, and started the 2-hour drive to the cabin. She hadn't been there in over a decade. It sat tucked in the Appalachian foothills, quiet, surrounded by dense pines and silence. Back then, it had felt like their little escape. Now, it felt like the center of a mystery she never knew she was part of. The gravel crunched beneath her tires as she pulled into the overgrown driveway. The cabin looked weather-worn but still standing. Ivy crept along the porch railings. The front door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memory. Faded photos still hung on the wall. One of her and Marcus laughing in the snow, another of them sitting on the porch steps, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. She let her fingers graze the wooden floor, moving toward the fireplace. Just as Marcus had written, there was a loose board beneath the old rug. Her heart pounded. She pried it up carefully and found a small, metal lockbox hidden beneath. It was heavier than she expected. Angela placed it on the coffee table and opened it slowly. Inside were papers, legal documents, handwritten notes, copies of old letters, and something else. A black and white photo of a young boy standing beside a much older man, both of them wearing solemn expressions. On the back of the photo, written in Marcus's hand, "My real father, 1972. Do not trust what they told you." Angela's stomach dropped. She rifled through the papers, her eyes scanning phrases that chilled her. Adoption concealed by court order. Land transaction under false identity. Inheritance fraud involving multiple parties. And then, tucked into the corner of the box, she found a folded legal document titled, "Last Will and Testament of Marcus Elijah Green." Angela's name was listed as the sole beneficiary. Her breath caught. This wasn't the will that had been read at the funeral. Marcus's family had claimed he died without one. No mention of her, no assets, nothing. But this document was signed, notarized, dated only 6 months ago. Angela sat back, stunned. Darren had been right. Marcus's family had known, and they had tried to erase her from his legacy, literally. Suddenly, a sound echoed outside, gravel shifting, tires. Angela rushed to the window and saw a black SUV pulling slowly into the driveway. Her hands gripped the edge of the windowsill. They had found her. Angela's mind raced as the SUV came to a stop. Two men stepped out, both dressed in dark suits, both familiar. Marcus's cousin Gerald, and an older man she recognized from the funeral, a lawyer who had stood silently while the will was dismissed. They approached the cabin with purpose. Angela tucked the will and the photo back into the lockbox and calmly placed it under the couch cushion. She opened the door before they could knock. "Angela," Gerald said, forcing a smile, "we didn't expect you to come up here." "You didn't expect me to find the truth," she replied, her voice calm but cutting. The lawyer stepped forward. "There's been a misunderstanding. There are documents." "I have the real will," Angela interrupted. "Signed, notarized, and it names me as the only beneficiary. So if you came here thinking you could scare me into giving up what's mine, you wasted a drive." Gerald's face tightened. "That cabin belongs to the family," Marcus said. "No," Angela said sharply. "Marcus never sold it. He never wanted to. He left it to me." For a moment, the two men stood silently, calculating. Then the lawyer sighed. "You realize if you make this public, it's going to drag the whole family into a legal mess. It'll be in the papers. People will talk." Angela met his gaze. "Good. Let them." The men didn't speak again. They turned and walked back to the SUV. As it drove away, Angela stood on the porch, a quiet strength rising in her chest. For the first time since Marcus's death, she felt peace. Not because the grief had faded, but because the truth had finally surfaced. In the days that followed, Angela filed the will with a new attorney and began the process of challenging the probate ruling. The documents in the lockbox revealed a long history of manipulation. Land titles forged, family secrets buried, even Marcus's original birth certificate altered to protect an inheritance scheme that had lasted generations. When it all came out, it made headlines. But Angela didn't care about the noise. She cared that Marcus's name was cleared, that her place in his life and legacy was no longer something anyone could deny. Months later, standing on the porch of the cabin Marcus had loved, Angela planted a rose bush beside the steps. Not to mark a grave, but to honor a truth, one that no longer had to be hidden.